I'm making this screencast to go over some early Japanese politics, government, and things of that nature. So let's start with the flag. Looking at the flag, the Japanese flag is made up of a red circle symbolizing the sun against a white background. It's known as the Hayanomau circle, or the Hayanomau flag, and essentially it symbolizes the sun, keeping in mind that Japan lies at the far west of the Pacific Ocean and the sun rises over the sea to the east. And they call themselves the nation of the rising sun, people of the rising sun. And we went over a little bit of the geography in another screencast, but is just a review. Keep in mind that Japan is an archipelago with many, many geographic challenges. And those geographic challenges also influence and shape the political structure of Japan and early Japanese shogunates. So we're going to go over in this screencast some of their early political structure. We, in another screencast, went over some religious aspects of Shintoism and kami. But in this screencast, we're going to describe the shogunate, and we're going to describe the overall feudal structure of medieval Japan. So let's get into it. So if we were to compare and contrast feudal Japan to feudalism in Europe and medieval Europe, there are many similarities, including a social class structure in which an emperor or is at the top, or a monarch at the top. I would equate the shogun and the emperor together as the monarch in European feudalism. The emperor in Japanese feudalism doesn't really have any real power or control. The real political power and control is ruled by the shogunate, and the emperor is more of a status symbol than anything else. But underneath the monarch, or underneath the shogun rather, are the daimyo in Japan. The daimyo are the equivalent to the lords in European feudalism, followed by knights or samurai in Japanese feudalism. And at the bottom in Japan, they have a peasant class that includes merchants and artisans and people of farmers, peasant farmers, and people like that. So we could do a really in-depth comparison of the samurai and the knight, both being warriors and both following codes, specifically for the samurai following the code of Bushido, which is to the Japanese knights the equivalent of following the code of chivalry, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But a couple of the things I want to make point of. Shogunate itself means, the concept of shogunate means absolute control form of government, absolute power. They're military governments, and they have very militaristic in nature. And the samurai are very important in holding together that military structure. Samurai are warriors that come from ruling clans and that are given power by the daimyo, those lords who are given land in lieu of money. And from time to time through medieval Japan, there are warring states. These clans fight with each other. There's a lot of infighting among the clans and grappling for power. And evolving from them are the ruling classes, or the ruling shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate being the last major shogunate in Japan that ruled from 1600 to roughly 1868. And the Tokugawa shogunate in 1600 would move the capital from Kyoto to Edo, which is Tokyo today. So let's describe the concept of Bushido. Bushido is essentially it's the samurai code. It means the way of the warrior, and essentially it's how the samurai warrior is able to live a life of frugality, loyalty, and honor. They follow martial arts, and they learn how to fight. And young samurai learn how to make and craft swords, and how to fight using swords. And they put this concept of victory and winning over life, even. This idea that it's more noble to die than it is to lose. And that transcends all the way even into World War II, that code of Bushido, and where we see in World War II kamikaze pilots. Kami, obviously meaning spirit, and we talked about that with Shintoism, and kazi meaning wind. Kamikaze literally translated into divine wind, and comes from the old word when the Mongol ships in the 13th century twice tried to invade Japan, but were destroyed by typhoon winds. So in Bushido there are 7 virtues, but essentially all 7 virtues together combined encourage these warriors, these samurai, to live a life of frugality, loyalty, and honor. And overall, the samurai defend the shogunate, and the shogunate is the ruling class, the governmental class, that gives the samurai, the daimyo, the power. So here are a couple notes on Tokugawa shogunate. Again, if you want, feel free to hit pause and read this over. But essentially, it is how the government is able to kind of control the political structure and control the peasants and the people in Japan for hundreds and hundreds of years, all the way until 1853, when Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States goes into the ports of Japan and essentially with his gunboats showed the Japanese emperor gunboats and Western technologies and Western military strength. America flexes her muscles a little bit, and they essentially forced the Japanese people into signing the Treaty of Kanagawa, which essentially opens Japan up from an isolated time period. And after that, from roughly 1868 onward, we see roughly 1868 or 1869, we see the beginnings of a restoration, the Meiji Restoration. You'll learn more about this next year, but essentially, it's the ending of the Tokugawa shogunate. It's the ending of the shogunate rule over Japan, and Japan begins to westernize, if you will. So those are some key notes, some key ideas to check out, to learn more about, to dive deeper into. That was just scratching the surface. Hopefully, I gave you something all to think about.